What's going on, everyone? David F. Haas. You're listening to the David F. Haas podcast. I'm your host, sitting in the studio all by my lonesome today, recording this podcast. And today's podcast is going to be about neutrality and trying to get to the state of neutrality, which is on Hawkins' scale of consciousness rates at 250, which is well above the critical level of 200, where life becomes easy and everything goes from forcing to flowing. And the reason we're going to talk about neutrality is because it's been high on my radar in the last 3 or 4 weeks here, the U.S. election, the COVID lockdowns, and it's very hard to remain unbiased. It's very hard to not allow your emotions to take a hold of you during this kind of tumultuous time that we're living through. But ultimately, I still live by the belief that it's never about what's going on out there, and it's always about what's going on in here. And so when I found myself getting really charged up by what was happening in the media, what was happening with the U.S. election, what was happening with the coronavirus and our response and how it's affecting businesses, and like literally, you start going down the rabbit hole of this thing, and you can just get consumed by it. And the more and more you get consumed by it, the more and more you think that the world is coming to an end. And I had to sit in a long meditation and do some reading on Hawkins and get back to what the truth is. And let me this first before I talk about how I came to this place of ease and stress-free about what's going on, which is recently just happened to me in the last few days here, how I got to this level. I want to talk to you about the things that were really revving me up, and so that you can identify with them. And then this is not meant to rev you up either, but just I think you'll learn from my example of being able to transcend that state of consciousness where I was holding on to my opinions and my positions, and learning how to make the shift to this place of neutrality. And in the state of neutrality, everything is okay, no matter what happens. And it's a really nice place to be. And you really, truly believe it. This is not just something you're saying. You really, truly believe that no matter what happens, who's the president, how we respond to this coronavirus, you're going to be okay. So some of the things that were really on my radar was the coronavirus response, the mass spreading of fear I felt was a huge overreaction. And for me as a business owner, my wife also owns a business. It was just really, affecting our finances a lot. We went from making good money to having to take money out of our savings in order to float our lifestyle, to float our businesses. And yeah, it just, it gets overwhelming. And I can see how people have bought into the fear of the coronavirus. I get it. When you're looking at things through a microscope, it's very easy to see that, oh my God, there's this disease out there and it's coming to get you. And I got completely consumed by my position of health is about what is going on within your own body, and you don't have to fear anything outside of yourself. I still believe that, but the reason I'm saying I got connected to that is that I was getting emotionally charged up by people that have different opinions than I do. And that's never the way I want to be. I never want to be in this place where I can't have a conversation about someone that has a different position than I am, because then we get into this place where the only conversations you're ever having are with people that agree with you, and you can never expand the circle of what you know by only having those conversations with people that are in the same state of consciousness as yourself. You need to move yourself from lower states to higher states, and that's how you expand on your own. And that's essentially what ended up happening with me. And as I'm sitting here talking about this, I'm like, oh, maybe these posts that I made were a good thing. So ultimately, I made some Facebook posts that would be considered controversial with regards to the truth about vaccines, the truth about our own health, what I think would be a better response from the government and from us as a whole as a society to control this thing. And yeah, so I got some backlash. Some friends messaged me, created some tension in relationships. And as as I'm getting into these conversations and comment sections in my Instagram, I'm at a place now where I'm just so much more confident in what I'm saying and connected to my truth, that it's not taking me to places that it used to take me, which would be to the place of fear, the fear that people aren't going to like me and all these things. I'm completely okay with that. I've come to the understanding that not everyone's going to be aligned with what I'm aligned with, and not everyone's going to like me. Before, that used to be completely debilitating for me, and every decision I made was based around people liking me or not. So if someone would have negatively commented on a post, it would trigger me into self-doubt, and I would start questioning whether this is what I want to keep doing, blah, blah, blah. You get where I'm going with it. It was just debilitating. So now I was able to transcend that. But then the next thing now that I had to transcend was this holding on to outcomes. And the big outcome that I was really holding on to, even more so than the response to the coronavirus, was this limitation of free speech. And I'm not a big fan of the way Trump governed. I think he did a good job exposing the one-sided media on both sides, and it made us all question things more, which ultimately I think is good. You want to be questioning everything at all times. This was revealed to me when I went vegetarian. My whole entire life, I had been told that I needed to eat meat and dairy and drink milk to have strong bones and do all these things. And I now realize that was all a lie. And it was all just being fed to me by lobbyists that were creating the 5 basic food groups, and all of them, most of them, which were dairy and meat and poultry. And when I came to the realization of this truth, I was like, oh, geez, what else have I been buying into? And then with the removal of Donald Trump from all social media platforms, this one really kind of like sparked a nerve in me, because as the same thing I went through as a vegetarian, I could see how they were silencing the truth. And I'm not saying that what Donald Trump is speaking is the truth, not one bit. What I'm saying, though, is that big corporations having the ability to silence anybody is dangerous. And I started getting wrapped up in it. Like, this thing was consuming me. I was like, this is complete BS. I was getting in fights with friends and family over it. And I was like, I don't know why I allowed myself to get consumed by this thing. And then I recognize it. And I think that's a critical factor in growing, is recognizing when things are getting out of control, or recognizing when your mind is running away and the overthinking is coming in and you can't sleep, and recognizing when your health is off, your sleep patterns are off. And so I just recognized all of it, and the stress and everything that was going along with it, and the getting fired up from people's responses. And then I said, whoa, what is happening here? Right. And ultimately I sat in this really long meditation, and basically it was revealed to me that I wasn't being neutral. Okay. So this idea of neutrality is a tough one, because people believe that we need to stand up for what is right. And I don't think that neutrality is about passivity. Okay, so let's dig into this a little bit. I'm just kind of having a conversation with myself here, so hopefully it's serving you. But if you are neutral, which means that you can have your own beliefs, but whatever happens in society, you're okay with. So if Donald Trump gets reelected or doesn't, you're okay with. If Donald Trump gets deleted from Twitter and all other social media platforms, you're okay with it. And ultimately, this is tied to the belief that no matter what happens, God, or the belief of your understanding of whatever God is, infinite intelligence, universe, always has your back. And even if you die, you're going to be okay. So that's a big one for people to try and wrap their minds around, is to come to this realization that even if I die, I'm going to be okay. So it's hard to get connected to neutrality when, for me, like my example is like my livelihood is being taken away. I'm, losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So it's like, how are you okay with that? Right. And then if big tech starts to silence my voice, let's say, how are you okay with that? And the ultimate feeling is that greater levels of consciousness are always going to prevail. And I can explain this through me going vegetarian. So when I went vegetarian, I spent probably a good 5 years of being vegetarian preaching about vegetarianism. And I didn't convert anyone during that time into a vegetarian because I was coming from a place of force. But then finally, when I got to this place where I'm like, you know what, I'm okay. Like, I'm neutral on this. Like, this is what I want to do. So I'm just going to do it. And if people question me about it, I'm just going to say, this is because what I love to do. And then once I did that switch and I moved to a more neutral stance on vegetarianism, and I wasn't so stuck in the position of being a vegetarian, then I started to attract more and more people that wanted to know the truth about what it was that I was doing and why I was doing it. There was no promoting vegetarianism. There was no protests in the street. I wasn't attending PETA rallies. I just was neutral on the subject. And because of that neutrality, people were open to asking me questions because they could tell I wasn't going to come back and attack them for eating meat or cheese or whatever it may be. So from that place of neutrality, I began to promote and attract change with people around me. So, probably over the course of my 16 years of being veg, I probably converted, 10 or 15 people to vegetarianism. And, I'm like, oh, okay, that's how it works, right? That's how it works, is that we change from within. And when we can start to look within, where there is no need to go on the street and promote and have signs and riot, it's like we will attract the people that are ready to rise up with us. So, and I think that's probably what you saw with, the Martin Luther King movement. While he was out there, and a lot of his message was coming from this place of we can't ignore this anymore. People were attracted to his message, and much like Dr. David Hawkins, who had this message of spiritual growth and moving up the scale of consciousness, and he would put on lectures and they would sell out in a minute. There wasn't like any promotion. It was literally, hey, I'm doing this lecture. Boom, they would sell out in a minute. He wrote, all these books that, did really, really well. And his one of his last books, which was Letting Go, even though he's passed on, is gaining all kinds of popularity because of the level of consciousness that book was written from. So the what I'm getting at is, if you change from within, you will create the change that you're looking for in the world. And the world is ultimately constantly expanding and growing towards a higher state of consciousness. And if you just believe and trust and know that, then there's nothing to worry about, right? And even if big tech takes away our freedom of speech, you're going to be okay, because eventually the truth will be revealed, and eventually higher states of consciousness will start attracting more and more people, and eventually there will be no ignoring it. And that's kind of like what happened to me with vegetarianism. When I was a vegetarian, 16 years ago when I started, there was like literally nowhere you could eat. Now I can eat anywhere, right? Well, I went to like vegetarian festivals or Veg Fest. Like one, they didn't even exist back when I went veg, but now it's like I go to them and they're jam packed, full of all of these vegetarians and vegans, right? So greater states of compassion and lovingness will always prevail. Okay, so then we have to get into, okay, how do we get to the place where we are neutral? Like, how did I just get to this place of neutrality? And I got there relatively quickly. Like, I'm literally completely free. I just listened to the announcements here in Ontario of more lockdowns, more measures, and I'm just like, yeah, well, it is what it is, and I'll adapt and I'll be okay. Even if I lose my house, lose my business, I'm going to be okay. That's not going to happen. But even if that were to happen, I would be okay. And I got to this place by continuing to let go. So what I realized when I was getting charged up by these things like big tech taking away free speech, with more lockdowns, with the terrible COVID response that I feel, is that those things were still inside of me, right? And so let's look at the big tech taking away my voice. Well, that is the belief that I am important. And this is a controversial spiritual growth technique, but one of the things you can do to grow spiritually is to repeat the phrase, I am not important. And what this is essentially doing is it's breaking down the ego, because the ego in every morsel of its being is obsessed with getting. All right. We need to get more. We need to be louder. We need to get more attention. We need to get more love. We need to get more things, bigger houses, more money. But when you learn to transcend the ego and you learn to become aware of these patterns, you get completely, can completely erase getting, because you realize that you are complete as you are, right? And the only time that you are not feeling complete is when you are in getting mode, right? Because you believe that I need to get something in order to feel complete, but completeness exists within. This is getting deep, I know. So ultimately what we want to be is connected to the present moment at all times. And when we're not connected to the present moment, we have to look at why we're not connected to the present moment. So, for example, if I'm looking at big tech taking away free speech, I am projecting into the future of all of the bad that's going to come because big tech is taking away free speech, right? So with that awareness, I just have to say, okay, well, right in this present moment, everything is okay. Everything is fine. This could be referred to as like an athlete getting into the zone, right? It's like you watched Michael Jordan just released a documentary and talks about getting into the zone. And when you're in the zone, you are completely present. There is no thought, not of the past, not of the future. You're just completely present. And basketball players have described it as like the hoop just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's like a swimming pool. They literally can't miss. But the second they think, oh, I've hit 11 in a row, maybe I'm going to hit 12, that's when they miss. And that's because they started projecting into the future. Or the second they think, oh, I'm about to hit my all-time record, just like and they start thinking about the past, that's when they get out of the zone. So ultimately what we want to do as spiritual beings that are trying to move up the scale of consciousness, we want to stay connected to the present moment as much as possible. Now, the crazy thing is that most of us probably only in the present moment for maybe a minute or two a day, right? Which is just wild when you think about it. And this is just the power of the ego, right? And the ego, which is our minds, and how much it is tied to this idea that it is important. And the way it justifies its importance is by continually pushing us outside of the present moment, either looking into the past, which is creating guilt, regret, and stress, or looking into the future, which is creating anxiety. But if we can start to identify why we're going to the future, if we can start to identify why we keep looking to the past and where that began in our life, then we can become free of that through the letting go process, which is essentially just connecting to those feelings. And then we can connect more and more to the present moment. And in the present moment, everything is perfect, right? If you could stay connected to the present moment at all times, you would be enlightened, all right? So what does that mean for regular Joe Schmo that is like, I just don't want to be stressed out about this stuff, right? So ultimately what that means is to begin to become aware of why you're being triggered by whatever it is you're being triggered by. Literally just asking that question and observing where your thoughts are going. So if your thoughts are going to like, oh, the world is coming to an end and Biden is going to kill the economy or whatever, Donald Trump is going to start riots, I don't know what it is where you're going. If you continually are projecting in the future, you can see that you're in the state of fear, right? So being in the state of fear is protecting you from feeling something from your past, pain that you felt when you were not in control. I'm not sure. I'm just snowballing here. And when you can identify what that is, you can then allow yourself to go back and feel that pain that you felt as a child. And then you can become free of projecting into the future because you'll no longer be trying to protect yourself from that pain that you once felt. I hope I didn't lose you on that, because it's pretty important to recognize when we are not in the zone, which is pretty much all the time for all of us. But if you learn to connect to the zone, even for 10 minutes a day, it has huge healing properties. It gets us aligned with our true selves, and then also it creates like way more productivity, way more sense of fulfillment, way more sense of happiness. These are the things that happen when we go through the letting go process. So if you want to not get wrapped up in all of this, the thing is first to realize that higher states of consciousness will always prevail, and that has been just seen throughout the course of time. I'm watching the show Vikings right now, which is it's a good show, but it's super violent, and I've really gotten away from violent shows. But I'm watching the show Vikings, and I'm just looking at it now from the state of consciousness that I am and where we are as a society. And it's actually comical to me that people used to kill and loot and steal to gain more gold. But essentially, that's all we're doing today. We're just doing a dumbed down version of it, where we're not hurting others as much as we once were, but we're hurting ourselves. We're being stressed out. We're becoming anxious to the point where we're drugging ourselves. Our suicide rate's higher than it's ever been. Our obesity rate, our diabetes, we're unhealthier than we've ever been, and we're not looting and killing people anymore, but we're doing it to ourselves. So the next evolution of the human race will be the evolution of our spiritual self and letting go of this ego. There will be no longer the next evolution will no longer be looking out there to feel a certain way. We'll begin to look within ourselves. And I was watching I don't know who it was, and I wish I would have grabbed it, but it was this black leader, and he was essentially saying that the next evolution for black people is to start looking within and stop looking without, right? He's like, we're past that point now. We've gotten to a point where we don't need to riot and demonstrate. We need to start looking within, letting go of the anger, healing from that hurt. And I was like, wow, that was so profound. But it's the same thing for all races. It's like, let's stop looking outside of ourselves and let's start looking within so that we can heal. Because as we heal and raise our vibration, raise our state of consciousness, we are going to attract people with us. It will happen naturally, right? People will begin asking, what are you doing? You seem so calm during this thing. You seem to still be in abundance. You still seem to be stress-free and in good shape and happy. What are you doing differently than I'm doing? And then that's when you can really truly help people, because they're coming from a place of seeking out higher states of consciousness. So yeah, that's how we overcome this. We go within and we heal, and we learn more and more about how to do that, more and more about letting go. We connect more and more to the present moment, and then we will be in this state of peace that will transform the world. And it's available to us right now. The teachings are out there. They've been in the field for 2,000 years. So get to work. Anyways, we'll leave it at that. I hope that was it was helpful. It was kind of just me kind of spilling my thoughts out onto the podcast. But I think it's good to see that even me, I'm not saying that I'm any different than anybody else, but I've been on a spiritual path for the last 15 years, and I still get wrapped up in this stuff. So the process is continuous. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's like it never ends. You just continue to grow. I mean, I guess it would end at some point when you get to a state of enlightenment. But for us, it's like it's a continuous process until we get to a place where we're just at peace at all times. And man, what a great place that would be. So thanks for taking the time to listen, and look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.